Hello, my name is Justin Barrett, and today I'm going to be teaching the KVZ Manufacturing Logical Reasoning question, but before I get into that, I'll give a little introduction. As I said, my name is Justin. My LSAT journey started my junior year of college when I decided that I wanted to go to law school so that I would study for this exam. For me, what it was all about was a lot of perseverance. I practiced just about every day. I pored over questions until they made sense. I didn't let anything go by me. I didn't just look for a right or wrong answer. I looked at what was right and what was wrong and why they were like that. I would go beyond just the actual facts of the questions, and I would look for the patterns. I would look for the things that made them true and made them false, or in the reading comprehension, the way to connect them back to the passages, and for the logical reasoning. Some of it came, or for the I apologize for the logic games, some of it came rather naturally for me as a math major, but still a lot of it was learning the correct way that I wanted to diagram, the correct way I wanted to think about it, and the correct way I wanted to go about it. So for me, the biggest way that I got to the LSAT score that I got to was plain old perseverance and a lot of hard work, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears getting through there. In terms of some tips that I would give anyone who's preparing for the LSAT, first and foremost, read carefully and thoroughly. I know it seems very obvious, I know it's said 1,000 times, but it really is so true. There are trap answers for a question every time almost, and it's so easy to just fall into those trap answers and not really think about anything else. You can analyze all of the other answers, but if you forget what you're doing and just kind of accept that in your brain, you're not going to give a full analysis, you're not going to do the correct research into the problem, you're not really going to know what's going on. So reading thoroughly, reading carefully is really the big first key to any problem on the LSAT, no matter if it's reading comprehension, logical reasoning, or a logic games question. On the other hand, you have to be able to move on from a question, and that's my second tip. I personally, I have a little bit of trouble if I can't quite figure out the answer. I'd like to sit there and just try and figure it out, but there gets a point where you have to understand that at some point you need to narrow it down to a few answers, make your best guess, and move on, because if you keep wasting time on one question, you will let other questions suffer. And the key is partly, yes, to get as many questions right as possible, but the key is also to make sure you logically work through as many questions as possible themselves, so that you give yourself a better chance to get a higher score and to do more correctly. And finally, it's not exactly about preparation, but I think it's still really useful, is to make sure you keep a life outside of studying. I know I work really hard and I spend a lot of time, but there's something to be said for just going out with some friends, having a nice dinner, and just forgetting about the LSAT for a little bit. You can overstudy, you can overwork your brain, at least in those short periods of time. Yes, you can never really prepare too much for the LSAT, but if you're sitting there 10 hours a day straight, 7 days a week for 3 months, you're going to burn out, you're going to feel so much pressure, you're going to feel mentally drained, you're not going to be able to give what you want to give to the exam. So truly, see your friends, take time to think about other things in the LSAT, rest, relax, and I know it's really hard to say because I stress myself, but try not to stress about it. Yes, it's important, yeah, it's a big deal, but if you take the time and take the effort and put it into it, you really don't have anything to worry about. So, and in terms of the last question, what cereal would I be if I had to pick? I have to say I would be Reese's Puffs for a few reasons. First of all, Reese's Peanut Butter Cups are pretty much the best candy that was ever made, so it's kind of hard to beat that logic. But, people like Cocoa Puffs, people like Peanut Butter Captain Crunch, they're both really good things, and I think that's great, and I like them too. But for me, putting them together is kind of just taking the best of both worlds and making it even better. And I'm not saying I'm the best of both worlds in every way, but I like to think that I bring a lot of variety to the table. Particularly, I was a math major in my undergrad, and now I'm in law school, and I brought a lot of different kinds of thinking together to be able to get where I am today, both based on my LSAT score and now based on what I've been doing in law school. So really, I thought that cereal was kind of fitting because it definitely is a little bit of the best of both worlds. Okay. So now getting into the question a little bit. This question is about Jennifer, who worked at KVZ Manufacturing for just over 3 years. She plans to spend the entire 4 weeks with her family of her paid vacation, to which she is entitled this year. And anyone at KVZ Manufacturing who's worked for between 1 and 4 years is automatically entitled to exactly 3 weeks of paid vacation each year, but can apply up to half of any vacation time that remains unused at the end of 1 year for the next year's vacation. Now, these questions throw a lot of information at you right away, so for me, the first step that I always do just to kind of start to get my head around is to go sentence by sentence, clause by clause, and really see what each piece of the question brings to it, what information you can get from it, and what you can do with it. Okay? So looking through the first question, we know Jennifer's worked there for over 3 years. Okay? It's a good fact to note. Furthermore, that she's going to be using the entire 4 weeks that she's entitled to of paid vacation this year with her family. Now, for me, words like entire jump out at me immediately. They're completely inclusive. So if you see the entire 4 weeks that she's entitled to this year, that means there's not going to be any more weeks left over. So if she has 4.5 weeks, that wouldn't really apply to this question because they said that she's using the entire 4 weeks. So it's always important to look for words like that, words like entire, words like all of, words like exhausts, something that indicates that there's this specified amount of something that you can really grasp onto. So in this case, we know it's an entire 4 weeks. Okay. Moving on to the second sentence, it discusses that 1 to 4 years gets 3 weeks of entitled vacation each year. So that's useful when we're combining it with some of the other facts we already have, but we'll get back to that in a moment. And then, also very important, noting that you can apply half of any unused vacation time from the previous year to the current year. Okay, as I said, it will be important then. So, then after that, also, you can just begin to draw a few conclusions. You don't want to go too in-depth, you don't want to, overdo it and just think about it without ever getting to the answers, but it's going to be able to draw a few conclusions right off the bat from these facts that we've now listed out. Okay? So, we talked about that there's an entire 4 weeks, and then she gets 3 weeks entitled each year if she's worked between 1 and 4 years. So this is where we combine the fact that she's worked for just over 3 years and the 1 to 4 years requirement. So because just over 3 years falls in between 1 and 4 years, she's entitled to 3 weeks vacation this year. Now, as we said, she's using the 4 entire weeks that she's using. So besides those 3 that she's entitled to use, she'll have exactly 1 other week of vacation this year. Okay, so that's going to be important to note when we combine it with the other facts. Now, as we discussed, you can apply half of unused vacation from the previous year to this current year. Now, what I said before about the word entire, this is where it kind of comes into play a little bit. When you look for those kind of words, it should set off a little bell in your head because, oh, entire. So that means she only has 1 week extra this year. So that means that she must have had 2 weeks left over from last year that she's using that half of. Okay, so if you think about it, if you had 3 weeks left over from last year, you'd have 1.5 weeks that you could apply this year. That with the 3 entitled would give her 4.5 weeks. So yes, it's possible that she could use just 4 weeks this current year, but the question specifically says entire, meaning that that wouldn't be the case because if that were the case, there would be half a week left this year and then she wouldn't be using her entire vacation and that would fail. Those are the kind of processes we're going to go through when we go to begin to tackle each specific answer. Taking all these facts we've come up with, taking these conclusions that we've come up with, and working through them. So, very brief recap of things that you've learned just from our preliminary analysis before even tackling the answers is she's worked there just over 3 years. She's using all 4 weeks this year. Everyone between 1 and 4 weeks gets 3 years of vacation exactly. You can use half of your unused vacation time from your previous year. We now know that she has exactly 1 week this year besides the 3 that she would have been entitled to. And then furthermore, we realize that this is exactly half of what she had left over last year, which would have to be 2 weeks in that case. Okay, so moving on to the actual answers. One of the first steps I like to do is look at what kind of question it is. So this is a must-be-true question. Now these are a little tricky because this is a lot of times where we get into those trap answers that I was discussing during my tips. So these trap answers are ones that, they very well could be true, and sometimes they're even probably true, but that doesn't necessarily mean they must be true. Okay, so always be wary with the must-be-true question of trap answers, because they're definitely going to try and pull you in right away. They're going to have intoxicating, enticing information that you're going to want to get right into. But, relax, just read through each individual answer and work through it. Okay, so first thing I like to do on my first read through of the answers is look for anything that just seems blatantly irrelevant or that it couldn't possibly be supported in the facts. Okay? So, answer A, Jennifer did not use 2 weeks of the paid vacation time to which she was entitled this year. Based off the facts we have, seems like it definitely could be relevant, something that could be true. Nothing pops out as immediately irrelevant. Okay? B, if Jennifer continues to work for KVZ Manufacturing, she will only be entitled to 3 weeks paid vacation next year. Also seems like something that could plausibly, occur based off of the facts that we have. C, the majority of KVZ's employees use each year all of the paid vacation time to which they are entitled. Now, this is one of those situations of an answer where we can kind of, look for some of those clues that it might be an irrelevant answer. The fact that it's talking about a majority of KVZ's employees. But in the question, it didn't really discuss any employee besides Jennifer. It's talking about her situation and her facts, whereas this is just talking about the whole group of employees as a whole. So that's one way to kind of look at it. If you see something that wasn't even kind of discussed in the original problem, such as other employees, probably reason that this is going to be an irrelevant answer right away, and we will find out, and as we will eliminate it now, C is going to be an irrelevant answer. D, last year Jennifer took only 1 week of paid vacation time to which she was entitled. Again, could be plausible, there's nothing that immediately jumps out as that doesn't seem like something that we even kind of talked about in the stimulus, so we'll leave it for now. And E, KBZ manufacturing sometimes allows extra vacation time to employees who need to spend more time with their families. Now, yes, the stimulus did discuss families to some degree, and so I can see how this would be a little less obvious than C, that it's going to be irrelevant, but if you think about it, another way to think about it is this isn't something that is kind of mechanical. This is a very sort of subjective, mushy thing to talk about if there's not actually an actual statement about this. Stimulus doesn't discuss what the company's policies are in terms of things like, oh, well, we'll give you an exception, this or that for families. It's specifically talking about, 3 years, three and a half years, or however many years, 4 weeks of vacation, half use, there's a lot of mechanics going on in here, so these kind of more normative things about spending time with your family, having an exception, in cases like this, at least can usually be eliminated as irrelevant, and in this case it can. So, now we're left with answers A, C, and D after our initial elimination. And then in this case, to some degree, it's just kind of going to be going through and doing a mechanical working through them. So, first, looking at A. Jennifer did not use 2 weeks of the paid vacation time to which she was entitled last year. Now, we have discussed before that she has 1 week of extra time besides the 3 she's entitled this year, and as a result, that means she had exactly 2 weeks left over from last year. Okay? So, if Jennifer did not use 2 weeks of the paid vacation time to which she was entitled last year, that pretty much exactly lines up with what we're saying, but it's important to note that for A, it says Jennifer did not use 2 weeks. It doesn't say did not use at least 2 weeks. So, you can't really assume either way if it was at least or if it's not at least. So, if you think about the question, she did not use 2 weeks. If she did not use more than 2 weeks, would it be relevant to our question? We don't really need to think about it, but because if she used more than 3 weeks, that means she did not use 2 weeks. But could she use less than 2 weeks? Let's take a quick look. Well, we determined she has 1 week extra this year, and that means she has to have 2 weeks from last year. If she had less than 2 weeks, there's no way she could get that 1 extra. Even if she had 1.9 weeks left over last year, that would still not quite get her up to 1 when you take half of it for this year. So she had to have at least the 2 weeks. And as we saw, the fact that she's using her entire 4 weeks makes it exactly 2 weeks. But in this case, she did not use 2 weeks. It very well could be true and possibly must be true. So we'll leave that answer on the table as a definite possibility for being the correct answer. Looking at B. Jennifer continues to work for KBZ Manufacturing. She'll be entitled to 3 weeks paid vacation next year. 3 weeks next year. Now, we know she's worked for a little over 3 years. So next year, she'll have worked for a little over 4 years. Now, this is one of those kind of iffy areas where it could be true, but it doesn't necessarily have to be true, because the stimulus talks about between 1 and 4 years. It doesn't say if that's inclusive. It doesn't say if that's from the beginning of the first year to the end of the fourth, or beginning to beginning, or end to end. So we can't make a conclusive statement about whether just over 4 years will or will not fall within 1 to 4 years as per the company policies. So even though it could be true on some analyses, it doesn't necessarily have to be true. And this is another quick moment to take a little tip, and that's look for things that are inclusive or exclusive or completely lacking of it. In this case, 1 to 4 years doesn't talk about if it's inclusive or exclusive with the 1 to 4 and where it falls within those spans, so you can know that it might not be a right answer, at least it's something to be wary of, because it's not something that's quite as concrete, something that you can really base your thoughts off of. Okay, so we can eliminate B. Now, we have D as well. This answer is a very enticing looking answer. Last year, Jennifer took only 1 week of paid vacation time to which she was entitled. So, we said before that she's going to have 2 weeks left over from last year. That's what we figured out from the stimulus itself, that she has those 2 weeks from last year, so that she has the 1 extra week this year. Now, based on the fact that we know she gets 3 weeks each year, at least up to this year so far, first 3 years she got 3 weeks each year, it would seem like, well, she has 2 left over, she must have used 1. So definitely a very attractive answer. Definitely could be true. It might even be must be true. But one thing to note is that what we don't know is whether or not those were the only weeks she had last year. So while it could be true that if all she had last year were those entitled weeks, then this certainly would be true. But we need to think about the fact that she can hold over things from previous years. So if 2 years ago she didn't use all of her time, she could have had some that carry over to last year, So say she didn't use 2 weeks 2 years ago. She would have an extra week last year, which means she'd have 4 total. She could have spent 2 weeks on vacation and still had her 2 left. And these 2 left would give her the one that she needed for this year. Okay? So, a different way to think about it is, say every day I'm going to order a pizza that has 8 slices in it. Okay? And today I ate all 10 slices of pizza that were in my house. Okay? So that would make you think, okay, I had to have 2 leftover slices of pizza, which would mean you probably ate 6 pieces yesterday because you order pizza every day. But doesn't mean I didn't have more leftovers in my fridge yesterday too. I had leftovers from a couple days ago and had 10 pieces of pizza in my fridge yesterday, and so it's kind of similar to think about it in that way, that you can't immediately assume that just because a situation is sufficient that it's necessary. And this is one of those cases where it's certainly sufficient for her to have taken only 1 week of paid vacation last year, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it must be true. So we've now eliminated D, and as we said before, we're going to go look back at answer A just to double check everything. But as we said, from the stimulus, it was pretty clear that she needs 1 extra week of vacation this year beyond what she's entitled to, which means she needs 2 from last year. As we know, Jennifer did not use 2 weeks of paid vacation time, to which she was entitled last year. There's nothing about that could possibly be false, because she needs those 2 weeks, and she needs them to come from last year, because you can only hold over half of what was not used last year. So, in that case, we have our answer. So just a couple final takeaways is it's important, especially for these must-be-true questions, to really analyze the things that are concrete. Must-be-true is a very concrete way of saying things. So, like I said before, looking for those things like inclusivity and exclusivity in terms of ranges, looking for things like normative things like, they can give you an exception for your family, but it wasn't really discussed about in the mechanical sense in the problem, stuff like that. So, must-be-true, definitely look for those things that are firm, those things that are solid, that you can grasp onto and base your answer into. And then D is a classic example of a don't just get caught on a trap answer just because it doesn't seem like there's anything wrong with it. Make sure you're reading thoroughly and carefully and going through everything you can, taking that list that you made right off the bat and analyzing everything against those facts. And like I said, good luck to everyone who's studying for the LSAT, and work hard, read thoroughly, know when to move on, and make sure to keep your life. Don't worry about it too much. It'll be fine. Thanks for listening.